All right, so like imagine you're on trial for your life,
Yeah.
right? Accused of like messing with the youth and disrespecting the gods and like, instead of, pleading for your life, you use your defense as like another chance to like really challenge the foundations of your whole society.
I mean, talk about bold moves.
That's Socrates for you.
That is Socrates indeed.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yes, welcome everybody.
So today we are diving deep into Plato's Apology.
Oh yeah, the Apology.
Getting right to the heart of like, Socrates' legendary defense speech.
It's legendary for a reason.
So to guide us, through this, we've got, we're using Plato's account of the trial.
That's right. That's our primary source.
And our mission is, for you guys listening, is to really like grasp, the core arguments of Socrates' defense and understand his really complicated relationship with Athenian politics.
It's so complicated.
Explore his concept of wisdom.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, and appreciate, his unwavering defiance.
Oh, he was defiant.
And ultimately see why this trial continues to spark debate, all these centuries later.
Yeah, even today.
About free speech and the essence of philosophy.
Yes, absolutely.
And power.
Power dynamics always at play.
Absolutely. So let's picture the scene, right?
Okay.
Athens.
What is it all?
The hub of intellectual and political, life.
Oh, yeah, a bustling city.
Socrates, this figure known for his incredibly sharp intellect and, maybe even sharper questions.
Sharp wit, too.
He finds himself on trial.
Oh.
Let's just dive straight into, like, the charges against him.
Okay, let's get to it.
What exactly was he accused of?
So, formally, he was accused of two main things. Corrupting the youth of Athens and not believing in the city's gods, but instead introducing these new, unfamiliar spiritual ideas.
Okay, so
heavy stuff.
Really heavy charges.
Oh.
Yeah, let's unpack that first one, corrupting the youth.
Yeah.
So, like, what actions or beliefs led to this charge?
So a big part of it was his method of inquiry. He was known for engaging in public questioning and really rigorous examination of people.
Oh, yeah.
Young and old.
Everyone got it.
But his goal was to uncover truth and promote critical thinking.
Okay.
But some people saw this as leading the youth astray.
Yeah, I can see that.
Encouraging them to question norms and even disrespect authority.
Right.
And that didn't sit well with everyone.
Not at all. The text mentions that, like, young men, especially, like, sons of the wealthy,
oh, yeah,
were really drawn to Socrates.
Oh, they were fascinated.
And would often, like, try to emulate his questions.
Oh, yeah, they wanted to be like him.
Much to the annoyance of those they interrogated.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So those young followers, they saw Socrates, like, successfully exposing the lack of real knowledge in these prominent figures.
Right.
And then they try to, do it themselves.
Oh, yeah, they wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, question those in authority.
Exactly.
And often reveal that these individuals weren't, as wise as they pretended to be.
And boy, did that cause some trouble.
Oh, yeah, you can imagine that created so much, like, resentment and anger.
Oh, yeah. Those who felt publicly embarrassed or undermined, they didn't take it well.
Not at all. So it wasn't just like the questioning itself. It was like the social disruption it caused.
Exactly. It was like rocking the boat.
Yeah. So the accusation wasn't that he was teaching them to commit crimes or anything.
No, not really.
But that his whole approach to philosophy was seen as this, negative influence.
It was seen as disruptive and dangerous by some.
So how did he defend himself against this?
So his defense was pretty logical and straightforward.
Okay.
He said if he was corrupting the youth, it had to be unintentional.
Okay.
And if that were the case, his point was he should be corrected and taught how to be a better influence.
Okay.
Not punished.
Right.
He even asked this really direct question, would anyone intentionally want to harm their own associates?
That's a good point.
It's not a rational desire.
Right.
He also used this analogy about horse breeding.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that one.
Oh, yeah, it's a classic.
What was that about?
So he argued that if only he was corrupting the youth and every other Athenian was improving them, it would be like a really strange and unlikely situation.
Okay.
He compared it to horses.
Okay.
You would expect many people to know how to improve a horse.
Right.
Maybe only a few who could actually corrupt them.
Okay.
So the idea that the whole city barring him was like this positive influence on the young,
right,
it just seemed absurd to him.
Okay, yeah. I see his point there.
Mm-hmm.
So now on to the second part of the accusation, the one about his beliefs about the gods.
Okay.
It seems like kind of contradictory to accuse him of both not believing in any gods
right,
and then introducing new spiritual things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It doesn't make sense.
It does seem a bit odd.
Yeah.
You've hit on a key inconsistency that Socrates actually used brilliantly in his defense.
Okay.
He directly confronted Meletus, his main accuser, on this very point.
Okay.
He emphasized that he was accused of introducing belief in new spiritual things, specifically mentioning his belief in demons.
Right. Divine signs.
Exactly.
The famous daemonion.
Yeah, that's the one.
What did Socrates mean by that?
So he described it as a kind of divine sign, an internal voice or intuition that would often warn him against certain actions.
Okay.
But it wasn't like a positive voice guiding him.
Okay.
It was more like a restraint.
Okay.
Almost like an internal alarm system,
Right.
guiding his actions.
Okay, so like not a god in the traditional sense.
Not exactly.
But it reflects a really deep personal commitment to ethics.
Definitely a moral compass.
Right,
Yeah.
and that concept, has been explored throughout history.
Absolutely, in many different forms.
Okay, so if he believed in these demons, how could he be an atheist believing in no gods like he was accused of?
That's the point he was making.
Okay.
He used this contradiction to show how weak Meletus's accusations were.
Okay.
He kept pressing Meletus to clarify, did he think Socrates was an atheist, a believer in other gods, or someone who believed in the traditional gods just in a different way?
Okay.
And Meletus's responses were all over the place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were convoluted and contradictory.
Wow.
At one point, he's saying Socrates believes in no gods, and then at another, he's saying he's introducing new ones.
Okay, so it sounds like Socrates really, trapped Meletus.
Oh, yeah, he was a master of logic and argument.
Yeah, and this belief in demons also ties into that charge of not believing in the city's gods, right?
Absolutely.
Because...
So Socrates argued that believing in demons logically meant you had to believe in gods, at least in some way.
Okay.
Or at least in beings related to the divine.
Okay.
Like offspring or messengers.
Right.
So he was questioning how he could be accused of atheism and introducing new divine entities at the same time. It just didn't add up.
So this line of questioning was really meant to show that there wasn't much thought or genuine investigation behind those accusations.
Exactly. He was pointing out the absurdity of it all.
Okay. So let's move on to Socrates' stance on wisdom.
Okay.
This story about the Oracle of Delphi is super important for understanding his perspective.
Definitely a key moment.
So for those who don't know,
Yeah, let's set the stage.
the story goes that Chaerephon
A good friend of Socrates.
asked the Oracle at Delphi,
The ultimate source of wisdom in ancient Greece.
was anyone wiser than Socrates?
Big question.
And the Oracle's response,
Straightforward and clear.
no one.
That's right. No one was wiser than Socrates.
And Socrates' reaction to this was kind of surprising.
Yeah, it wasn't what you'd expect.
He didn't celebrate.
No, he was actually perplexed by it.
Really?
Yeah, he knew he didn't possess some great wisdom,
Okay.
so he set out on a mission
Okay, to figure out.
to figure out what the oracle could possibly mean.
Okay.
So he went to all these people who were considered wise,
Okay, like,
politicians,
oh, right.
craftsmen,
Okay.
all those who were renowned for their knowledge and skill.
So what did he learn from all of that?
He discovered a really important distinction.
Okay, what's that?
So these individuals, they often had a lot of expertise
Okay.
in their specific areas.
Right, like a carpenter would know a lot about wood.
Exactly. But they often lacked wisdom in a broader sense.
Okay.
And more importantly, they thought their expertise in one area meant they were experts in everything.
Oh, so they thought they knew more than they did.
Exactly. They had this false sense of knowledge.
And Socrates saw right through that.
Oh, yeah, he could see the holes in their arguments.
So he came to this conclusion that his wisdom was really that he knew he didn't know everything.
Exactly. He recognized the limits of his own knowledge.
Whereas those who were considered wise were actually ignorant but didn't even know it.
Yeah, they were blind to their own ignorance.
And that's a huge insight.
Oh, yeah, it's still relevant today.
Because it means that true wisdom starts with acknowledging what we don't know.
Absolutely. It's about humility and being open to learning.
And this pursuit of truth and exposing these false claims of wisdom, you can see how that would create friction.
Oh, yeah, especially with those in power.
They didn't like being shown up.
Definitely not. They felt threatened.
So this leads us to Socrates' defiance of authority and the Athenian political system.
Okay, let's talk about that.
He clearly wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo,
Oh, he was a true rebel.
even when it put him at risk.
He was willing to stand up for what he believed in.
Yeah, so he believed that his duty was to the divine.
To the pursuit of truth and wisdom.
Right, as suggested by the oracle,
Exactly.
and to the practice of philosophy.
It was his calling.
He said he couldn't and wouldn't abandon this way of life.
He was committed to questioning and seeking understanding.
Even if it meant death.
He was that dedicated.
And he used this striking metaphor to describe his role in Athens.
Oh, yeah, the gadfly.
Yeah, he compared himself to a gadfly stinging a lazy horse.
That's right, the horse being the city of Athens.
Right.
He was saying that his questioning might be annoying to some.
Right.
But it was necessary to wake them up.
To get them thinking.
Exactly, to prevent them from becoming complacent and stagnant.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't afraid to make a statement.
And his defiance continued right into the courtroom.
Oh, yeah, he didn't hold back.
He refused to play by the rules.
He didn't follow the usual legal practices.
Right, so he didn't try to get the jury to feel sorry for him.
He didn't use emotional appeals.
Right, no weeping family members.
No playing on their emotions.
He focused only on his arguments and the justice of his cause.
He wanted to win on the merits of his case.
He knew that these displays might be customary.
It was what people expected.
But he considered it beneath him.
It wasn't about manipulation for him.
And he thought it was irrelevant to a just verdict.
He wanted a verdict based on reason and evidence.
So it sounds like he was prioritizing his principles and his commitment to truth above everything else.
Absolutely, even his own survival.
And the text also mentions his actions during the rule of the 30 tyrants.
Right, a very dark chapter in Athenian history.
So how does that show his defiance?
So during that time, he refused to follow a direct and unlawful order.
From the tyrants?
Yes, from the ruling oligarchy.
And that put him in danger.
Oh, yeah, he was risking his life.
But he wouldn't comply with an unjust command.
He stood up for what he believed was right.
So this really shows his unwavering commitment to his principles.
He wasn't going to compromise his values.
And he was willing to stand up to illegitimate authority.
He wasn't afraid of power.
He also mentions an earlier instance when he was serving as one of the praetorians.
A very important civic duty.
And he was the only one who opposed this illegal demand to try a group of generals together.
That's right. He stood alone.
So this shows a pattern of him upholding justice.
Even when facing pressure and risk.
But despite his arguments and principled stances.
It's a tragic turn of events.
The trial didn't go his way.
Unfortunately not.
What was the verdict?
The jury found him guilty.
Wow.
281 jurors voted for conviction.
And how many for acquittal?
220.
So it was close.
Yeah, relatively speaking.
And it's interesting that the initial group of accusers was much larger.
Right. There were more people who accused him initially.
So maybe some weren't convinced by their own charges by the end?
It's possible they had second thoughts.
So after the guilty verdict, the court had to decide on the punishment.
Right. What should his sentence be?
What did Socrates propose as an alternative to death?
His initial response was pretty bold.
Okay.
Instead of suggesting exile or imprisonment,
Okay.
he said he should be honored and maintained at public expense.
What?
Yeah, like an Olympic victor.
That's unexpected.
He argued that his philosophical work was a service to Athens.
Okay.
It encouraged virtue and critical thought.
Okay.
So he deserved to be rewarded.
That must have been a shock to the jury.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they weren't expecting that.
So he did eventually suggest a fine, though, right?
He did, after some discussion and probably some urging from his friends.
Okay.
He proposed a fine of 30 minas.
Okay. And who was going to guarantee that?
Plato, Critobulus, and Apollodorus.
Wow. So his close friends and followers.
Yeah, they were willing to put up the money for him.
But in the end, the court sentenced him to death.
It's a tragic end to a remarkable life.
How did he react to that?
His final words are recorded by Plato, and they're really something.
Okay.
He was so composed and accepting of death.
Wow.
He believed that death was either like a peaceful sleep
Okay.
or a journey to another place.
Where he could keep philosophizing.
Exactly. He'd be with other great thinkers.
And he said a good person doesn't have anything to fear.
Not in life or death.
Because if you've lived a just life...
harm can't touch you.
So he was totally committed to his principles, even facing death.
It's a powerful testament to his beliefs.
So this trial and its outcome have obviously had a lasting impact on Western thought.
Oh yeah, it's a cornerstone of our intellectual history.
So let's talk about Socrates' legacy and what this event means in a broader sense.
Okay, let's do it.
So what does the trial Socrates tell us about free speech?
It's a cautionary tale. It shows how fragile free speech can be.
Yeah.
And how a society can silence dissenting voices.
Okay.
And punish those who challenge the norm.
Right.
So it shows this tension between the right to question and speak your mind,
Okay.
even if it's unpopular,
Okay.
and the desire of those in power to keep things stable.
Right.
So the open exchange of ideas, even uncomfortable ones, is essential for a healthy society.
Yeah, and silencing those voices can have terrible consequences.
Exactly. It can stifle progress and lead to injustice.
Okay, so what about philosophy? What insights does this trial offer about philosophy?
Well, for philosophy, this is like a foundational text.
Yeah.
It shows how important critical self-examination is,
Okay.
questioning assumptions,
Yeah.
and always searching for truth,
Okay.
even when it's unpopular.
Yeah.
And Socrates was so dedicated to his philosophical mission,
Right.
he was willing to die for it.
Yeah.
So he's become a symbol of intellectual integrity
Yeah.
and a life guided by reason.
That's powerful stuff.
It's a reminder that truth matters.
So lastly, what does the trial of Socrates reveal about power?
It shows how power can be used to silence ideas that threaten the status quo.
Okay.
It exposes the potential for injustice in any political system,
Right.
especially when fear, resentment, and a resistance to self-reflection
Okay.
take over.
Okay.
So even democratic societies can abuse power.
Especially when those in authority feel threatened.
Exactly. They can lash out and silence opposition.
It's a timeless story.
Oh, yeah. It still resonates today.
His dedication to his principles is incredible.
It's inspiring.
So just to recap some of the key takeaways.
Okay.
Socrates was dedicated to truth.
Absolutely.
He clashed with Athenian politics and societal norms.
He wasn't afraid to challenge the establishment,
He had a unique understanding of wisdom,
rooted in knowing what he didn't know.
and he defied authority.
He was a true individual.
So for you, the listener who's always seeking knowledge,
And those aha moments.
this trial shows the importance of critical thinking
And intellectual humility.
and the courage to stick to your beliefs.
Even when facing opposition.
So this brings us to a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Socrates chose to die rather than abandon his principles.
It was a defining choice.
So how far should someone go to challenge their society's beliefs,
It's a tough question.
especially when there's personal risk involved?
There are no easy answers.
And what parts of Socrates' defense resonate with you today?
What speaks to you most?
And what uncomfortable truths are we facing now?
What needs to be questioned and challenged?
These are important questions to think about.
They're worth pondering.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Plato's Apology.
And the legacy of Socrates.
It's been a fascinating journey.
Until next time.
Keep seeking knowledge.
And stay curious.